This event is about getting started with Mastercam Mill. So it's for kind of the newer person that doesn't have any or much experience with Mastercam. All right, I'm Patrik Warren. I'm a Mastercam sales for Utah, Nevada, Idaho, and Montana. There's a little bit about me, some of my interests and accomplishments. I think my greatest accomplishment is surviving those 2 kids and being empty nesters. We love that. Now let's jump right into the Mastercam presentation. We're going to go over 6 simple steps to create a model from a finished part from a sketch. We'll create the sketch, make the model, run the toolpaths, verify the finished part, output the code for the machine, and generate a quick setup sheet. So this is an example of a typical napkin sketch type drawing that may come from the shop. They just kind of mocked it up on graph paper, called out some key dimensions, and now it's our job to put that in a computer and actually create the model from it. So I'm going to open up Mastercam and show you how simple and easy this process can be. Okay, so we have that sketch that it was outlined for us. It looked like it was start off with a rectangle. So I'm going to create my square using the wireframe rectangle. And it told me it was 4 inches wide and 4 inches tall. And I'm going to place it on my origin. And I want to center it so it's in the middle of my 0, 0 point. This is going to make it easy to create the rest of my parts. So I will now, looking at the drawing, I see I have a couple holes on the side, 1/2 inch holes. So I'm going to create my circle point, lock my diameter at 1/2 inch. And I'm going to turn on my grid to make it a little bit easier to snap to it. It says snap at 1/4 inch increments. Knowing that, now I can go down here and easily snap to the correct location point for these 2 holes. Now I have a couple slots that I'll have to deal with. So if I open up my next command, I'm going to create some slots using the wireframe rectangular shapes command. And on that rectangular shapes, so the next components I'm going to start drawing are these slot shapes here. I can see they're 1 1/4 inch wide, and they're centered 1/2 inch up. So let's go ahead and put those in. We'll go in and create a rectangular shape on that. And this rectangular shape, I want the full width of it, so it's going to be 2.5. I'll lock it so I don't have to do this more than once. The width or height will be 0.5. And now I have my rectangular shape, but I have a round on the end of it, so I'm going to change it to an odd round. And I want to anchor it from the center of the object. So now it's ready to place on my screen. So now I can just go up that 1/2 inch and put it where it should be there, and it's in the spot I need it. I want to, let's lock the height on that as well. Let's put one on the other side. And the last slot I have is in the middle, so I can place that right there. But this one is not the same width and height as the other 2. So let's make a couple adjustments. I'm going to rotate it so it's 45 degrees per the sketch. And it tells me it's 3 inches wide and 1.5 inches tall. So let's go change those measurements to 3 and 1.5 inches. Now it's the exact size and shape I need it there. Next part I'm going to go to is I'm going to create my keyway cutout on there. So I'm going to go back to my, I'm going to turn my grid off for now so it doesn't interfere with me. I'll go back to my circle center point, change my diameter to 375. as it calls out right there. And I'm going to place it at the center of that hole and the center of that one. And now I'm going to create the keyway portion of that part. This I'm going to do with the rectangle command as well. So I'll hit OK, go to my rectangular shape. And if I go back to my sketch, I can see that this keyway is a 0.15 wide. So I'll create a rectangle. I don't want this to be rotated, so I'll change this back to 0. I'll change my height to 0.15, and I'll do the width at 1.5, and a regular rectangle. So now we're looking at that. I want to position it over here at the center of that circle, so I'm going to tell it, let's go on the right side for this guy. And then I'll tell it to go on the left side for this guy. And now I've got the keyway drawn in there. I'm just going to go in and use my trimming commands to clean this up. I'll use the divide, and we'll just zoom up here, and we'll just knock out the pieces we don't need on that side and this side. So when we're done with that, the only thing left is we have that section in the middle with those holes around that boss. It looks like, looking at the sketch, that is a 1/4 inch wide lip. And so those holes are centered in there. So I'm going to take that boundary that I already have and use my offset contour, or offset chain. I'll select this guy, tell it to offset it inside, and now I'm going to tell it I want it to offset at 0.125, and I'll do it 2 times. That'll give me the inside edge of my boss and the center line for those holes I need to create around it. Okay, so I'm going to clear colors, and we'll create the holes on here now. So if I go back to my wireframe, if I look at my sketch, I can see I have 4 holes along the line portion of it, and then 3 holes centered on the arc side. So I'm going to create the location points needed for those holes. I'm going to use the point segment command, and I'm going to lock this value at 4 because I want 4 holes on that line. So when I pick that line, it's going to give me 4 location points. On the arcs, I need 3 holes positioned around that arc. So I've got to bump this from 4 to 5, and now I have those 3 equally spaced holes there. So I have all of my location points for the holes. I can now create the holes. Using my arc command, we'll change my diameter to 0.15 for the sketch. Right there. And I'll place the holes all around the boundary. Once this is done, I'll just go ahead and get rid of the extra geometry I don't need. I'll get that and all the points, and I'll just use the delete command to get rid of that. Now I have the wireframe created. I'm ready just to go in and create my solid model from this. I'm going to position this into an isometric view. That way I can look at it from the top and the right front side as I build this, so I can see exactly what I'm doing. Looking at my sketch, it tells me that the entire part is about a 1/2 inch thick, and that boss is an 1/8 inch up because the other part's 375. So let's go ahead and create this model now using my solid commands. I'll do a solid extrude on this. And I'm going to pick the outer boundary and these 2 holes. And it automatically starts extruding up. So if I don't want this to go up, I'll just select on the contours and it will position it to go the opposite direction. It's defaulted to 1 inch thick. I know this has to be 0.375, so I'll change that. That looks good. Next thing I want to start extruding is maybe those slots. So I'll hit the apply button so I can select my slots now. And on these ones, I want to do a cut body. So I'll say both directions here, but I don't want it to go all the way through my part. It needs to go 1875 deep. So I'm going to actually reference the depth to the center of that section there. That gives me my 1875. Now I have to create the keyway cutouts. So I'm going to apply that, select my keyway cutouts. And this time I'll say, let's go through all. That way it's going to just knock it completely through the part, which is what I want. Next thing I'll do is I want to create that boss on the top. So I'll apply that, grab the outside of the boss. And I don't want to cut the body, so I'm going to change it to add boss and tell it here the distance I want it to add, 0.125. And then I have the cutouts on the inside that I'll need to the holes and that inside section. And because I can't see through my part, I'm going to go down here to the bottom right and change it to translucent. That's going to allow me to see through my part. And now I can select this boundary here and all of my holes for this next operation. And this one I do want to do a cut body, and I'll go through all. And there's my part minus the chamfers it calls out on the sketch. So if I go back to my sketch, it says these two slots have a 50 thousandths chamfer on them. This edge, these holes have a 25 thousandths chamfer, and this edge was a 0.15 chamfer, a 1.5. So let's put my chamfers on. I'm going to go to my chamfer command in my solid selection here. And I'm going to do the holes first. So I'll just pick this guy and this guy. And I'll change this to the 0.025. And the next one I want to do, I'll apply that. Let's go this section here and this section here. And that's going to be 50 thousandths. And we'll apply that and do this last section here at 0.015. So we have our model created, 3 different types of chamfers on there, or chamfer widths. And our part is now completely created. All we have to do is start applying toolpaths to get a finished part. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to position this so that the top of our part is set to 0. Because right now we started that boss and we went above 0. So I'm going to select everything and do a quick transform and just move it down that 1/8 of an inch minus 0.125. Tell it to move it. And now the top of our part is 0. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to create the toolpaths to create this out, or to cut this out. First thing we have to do is we have to select a machine. So we'll go to our machine tab. We're going to tell mill, I'm just going to use the default mill for now. Now our machine's been loaded into the drawing. I can tell it now some information that I want to start with. For example, what size stock I want to use to cut this out. I'm going to go with my stock setup and tell it all entities. It automatically picks up the values of everything on there. It actually grabbed the wireframe parts. That's why it's a little bit longer on the X than I wanted. So I'm going to change this back to 4. And say our stock is a 10th thou oversized, so we can face it off. So we'll tell it to display it. And now our stock is sitting right there, and it's 10th thou oversized, ready to be cut out. So we have a few simple tool paths we're going to apply to this to get our finished part. As we go through the tool paths, we're going to walk through and talk about some of the verification techniques, so you can see what the part looks like after you cut this out and how it compares to the solid model. Mastercam's got a lot of really simple and easy techniques to make it really easy to see what's going on before you actually commit anything to actually do it. So going here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my tool manager. I'm going to set up my tools that I'm going to use to cut this out. So what I'm going to do is I'll go up here to the tool manager, and I'm going to identify the tools I want to use. So using my filter commands, I can navigate this list and tell it different types of tools I want to look at. So I say the first thing I want to do is look at my face mills. And it's only going to show me the face mills I have, and I can drag them up into my list, and I can tell it what tool position it's supposed to be in if I have standard tooling position on my mill. So if I just edit that tool, and instead of using tool number 322, I can change it to tool position 4, and now my tool is going to be position number 4. I'll face it with that one. I'm going to take a 3/8 end mill to knock off the majority of that material on the boss. We'll also need an 1/8 inch material to get, or 1/8 inch cutter to get into that keyway. And then I'll need a chamfer mill to cut the chamfers. So I'm going to navigate my filter and say, show me only end mills. Let's grab our 3/8 end mill and our 1/8 end mill. Maybe these have different tool positions. Let's say our 3/8 is in position 8. So let's edit that. Make this position 8. And our 1/8 inch tool, I'm going to edit that and tell it that's in position 9. And a chamfer mill. Let's look at that. So we'll go to our chamfer mill options, and I'll just grab that 1/2 inch chamfer mill, and maybe that's tool 12. So once that's changed to 12, I have all of my tools except my drill, and I'm not going to put the drill in because I'm going to show you how Mastercam can automatically pick that up and calculate that for you. So I have my tool list created, my stocks created. I'm ready to run a tool path on this. First thing I'll do is a facing operation. Now, if you don't select anything as your facing region, it's automatically going to use the stock. So that red dashed line is our stock, and that's what I want to face. So I'll just leave that unselected. I'm going to grab my tool. It shows all the tools I've preloaded into this drawing. So I'll just grab that 2-inch face mill. And on my cut parameters, it's going to show me how it's going to cut this out. And what's really nice is you can use this preview tool button right here with the magnifying glass, and it will write the tool path on the screen so you can actually see it. So this is what it looks like with all the parameter settings I've got default. If I'd rather go zigzag instead of one way, and I preview it again, notice it keeps the tool down as it moves back and forth between there. If I change this to high-speed loops on the move between cuts and I preview it, I can see it rounds that section as it's moving down. So you can really do a lot in the preview to make it look exactly like you want before you ever hit the OK in here. I don't want to leave any stock on here, so we'll change that. We'll check our linking parameters, and it's going to just pick up some defaults here. It's going to go to an incremental depth of 0. I'll just say go absolute 0 because I want to go right to the top of that part. My top of stock was 10 thou above, which you picked up from the stock. That's good. And you can set up whatever you want your retract and feed plane to be. And we'll just leave the defaults there. So that being said, there's a quick facing toolpath. If I back plot it, I can see how it actually moves as it's facing that part off. And the next step I want to do is kind of maybe compare it to how it looks compared to the finished part. So that I'm going to go into my verify, and the verify is going to pick up the stock model we started with. And as I start running my toolpaths, it's going to show me that finished part as I go through the process. One thing you can actually do on this as well is you can compare it to your stock model. So if I go to my View tab and turn on my Compare window, over here on the Compare, you can set up values on what it's going to display on your stock relative to the amount of material you have left or have removed from your part. So I'm going to leave all these defaults, but when I hit the refresh button, it's going to take my workpiece and compare it to my toolpath that I've run. So you can see that green, that's in spec based on what I've told it over here. So it's in spec of plus or minus 10 thou, and you can adjust this and change it to your needs. And everything else around it is kind of this dark blue. That is more than 40 thousandths of material needs to be removed to get that to spec. And then as you see, it gets those chamfers on the edge. It gets a little bit closer to your final part. So it's a good way to kind of go back and forth and see exactly how close you are to your finished part. So that being said, we'll minimize that and start running the rest of these toolpaths. The next one I'm going to do is a dynamic toolpath. And again, this is like stock. If I don't define my machining region, it's going to use the stock for my outer boundary, which is what I want. But this also has a preview chains button down here. So if I hit preview chains, it's going to show me in black and red where that tool is allowed to cut. So if I look at that, there's a couple things I need to adjust to make it do what I want to do. First of all, I have a boss in the middle of that I don't want to cut out. So I want to do an avoidance region, and I'm going to use my boss selection method and just pick this face to select that boss. Hit OK. And now I'll preview it, and you can see it's avoiding that. But I also want the tool to come in from the outside, so I can change it to from outside, preview chains, and I can see where the tool is allowed to move outside. So that looks like I want it to look. So I'm going to go to my next step. And this time I'm going to go select the tool I want to use as the 3/8 end mill. And you have the ability to select holders. So you can go down the list and find a holder that you'd like to use. This is great for collision checking too. You can also adjust the projection length. So if I don't want that tool sticking out as far, I can tell it only hanging out 1.5 inches. I can go to my cut parameters, And I don't want to leave any stock on the walls or the floor. And I just want to see what that looks like before I exit out, so I can hit the preview button and it will write my toolpath and show me what it's doing. I can look at my linking parameters and make sure my depth is calculated correctly, because it looks like it's sitting up a little higher than I want. So if I want to go absolute and say I want the depth to be right here, I can reference that and I can preview that. And now it kicks the toolpath down to the depth I wanted. Once that's all set like I want here, I'll just hit OK. And now I've got those two toolpaths run. If I want to do a quick verify on this, I can select them both, go into my verify tab. I'll run it here. And as you get more and more toolpaths run, it's a little bit difficult to see one versus the other if they're all the same color. So we're going to turn on our color loop. And if I do that, it's going to change the color of every tool. So my facing one's the yellow, my 3/8 dynamic is the blue. How does that compare to the stock or the model that I created? I can hit the refresh here and I can see I got a lot more green on the screen now. And that's because I've cut that down to the face. I don't have the slots and the holes and stuff, but I'm getting closer to my part. So that looks good. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to use another dynamic toolpath, but rather than start from scratch again, if I like the parameter settings I've already got established here, I can take this toolpath and I'm going to copy it and I'll paste it right in here. Once that's pasted in, I have basically the exact same toolpath. I can just go in and reassign my geometry to what I'd like to cut now. So I'll go to my geometry, and maybe this dynamic toolpath is going to cut out these holes here through the middle and those. So I'm going to say, let's take off the avoidance region because I don't need that. And my machining regions, instead of using the stock, I'm going to define them as this guy, and that one. Let's go ahead and preview that so I can see what it's doing. So it's cutting in those areas, but it's allowed to move from the outside. And since these are internal boundaries, that's not what I want. So I'll change it to stay inside, preview it. And now it looks exactly like I want. So I'll go into my parameters now and change anything in here I want to. Like my depth is set to the 125 for that first one. So I can change my depth to the bottom of the pocket. I want maybe the top stock to be incremental off my geometry. And I want to go breakthrough, have that tool kind of come through maybe 10th thou. So if I hit preview, it'll write those toolpaths and show me what that's doing right there. And you also have the ability to position this part around if you hit this button right here, the hide dialog. If I do that, then I can move this around so I can see exactly what it's doing. So a dynamic toolpath, cutting out both holes and that inside slot. When you hit escape, it takes you right back into your parameters. I may look at my helical entry and say, I don't want it to be so tight. Let's loosen that up. So I may go to an entry motion and let's change my plunge angle from 2 degrees to let's say 6 degrees. I can hit preview to see what that looks like. And now I've opened that up and I'm like, okay, I'm happier with that. Let's try that. I'll hit okay there. And the next toolpath I want to run is these two slots on the side. I want to machine those out to that 1/8 inch, I'm not 1/8 inch, 1875 depth there. So I'll go to my dynamic toolpath again. And I'm going to say on my geometry for machining regions, we'll go from this section, I'll do the linked edges option here. And I'll tell it to enter on this side here. And I'm going to walk it around using this next button to the other side. So that just says that's where I'd like it to run my dynamic pocket. On the other side, since this one's hidden here, I can't see very well, I'm going to start on this side, walk it around, and then because my cutter comp would be incorrect, I'm going to use the reverse option to start on the other side. So now it's going to be comping left would be on the inside of that slot, and I'm where I need to be. I'll hit OK here. Let's go ahead and preview these chains, see what it does. It shows me where it's allowed to cut, but it's telling it to stay inside. I want to go from outside, so I'll preview that. And now it knows, because it's an open pocket, that the tool can travel in from that direction. I'll hit OK. And the tool we're going to use is the same 3/8 inch tool. Cut parameters will all be the same. I'm going to make sure my linking depth is set correctly. So my depth, I want to grab the top of that guy, and the top of stock will be the top of that guy. And let's preview it and see what we get. There we go. That looks pretty good. Next thing I want to do is I want to cut that keyway out. So for this one, I'm going to do a contour. And I'll select contour from my toolpath list. And we'll go around this edge here using that linked edges. I'll say start there, walk it around to the other side. Then I want to do the same thing on this one. Start here, walk it around to the other side. But again, I want to reverse it so it starts in the correct location. And I'm going to select my 1/8 inch tool now, because my 3/8 will not fit in there. So we'll change it to the 1/8 inch. Maybe we'll identify a different holder for this guy. Let's say that's the one we're going to use. And we'll hang this one out maybe 1.5 inches as well. Cut parameters. I might change it to where, so I have control on the machine with the cutter comp. But I can hit preview, and it's going to show me what it's doing right now. If I go to the hide dialog, let's go to a top view so I can zoom in on this. So I can see it's cutting that out, but I have some area in here that I'd like to be able to remove as well. So I'm going to use my multi-passes to take care of that. And let's turn on 3 multi-passes at maybe 50 thousandths and do a preview on that. Then I can see with that, it's now cutting out the entire section there. So I'm going to go back to an isometric perspective here. And I don't have my depth set correctly. So let's go check that out on my linking parameters. Top of stock will be at the top of the slot. Right here. And the depth of the part will be at the bottom there. And let's turn the breakthrough on this one as well, of 10 thou. And since this is a contour there, I'm going to use my depth cuts. Let's turn those on and say I want to go 50 thousandths maximum on my depth cut. If I preview that, it's going to show me my toolpath there. I can say keep tool down here, preview it. Now that one's actually showing me something bad there. So that's the nice thing about the preview, is I can see my toolpath is going to be gouging through my part as it moves from here to here, because I told it to keep tool down. So I don't want to do that one. And I can preview it again, and now those come back to where it's not going to interfere with my part. That looks good right there. Let's hit OK. And the entire part's cut out now except for the chamfers and those drills. So I'll quickly do the chamfer toolpath, and we'll talk about that auto drill. So on my chamfer toolpath, we have a toolpath called model chamfer. And I'm going to select the chains that I want to chamfer. And I have 3 different widths of chamfers, but I'm going to do it in the same toolpath because it's going to be relative to the model, which is really nice. So on my chain geometry, I'll select the boundaries that I want to chamfer. So let's go this circle here. And I want this to go in a counterclockwise direction. So let's flip that over. We'll go here on this one. We'll do the slots. So I'll go here, walk it around. And I'll go here, walk it around. This one needs to be reversed. So we'll flip it over there. And then the last chamfer here. And we'll just walk that around. Okay, so I hit OK to my geometry selection. I'm going to go to my tool, and I'm going to select that 1/2-inch chamfer. And maybe we'll use something like that with a 1.5 projection on that. And on my cut parameters, it's important to know that the chamfer width, if the model has the chamfer already drawn into it, which it does in this case, our chamfer width is 0. That will put the chamfer at the depth you want it. If it doesn't have a chamfer drawn on the model, then you can put in the chamfer width you want to use, and it will knock that off. So since ours does have it, we're going to leave our chamfer width at 0. Tell it how far to move the tool beyond the bottom. Let's say 20 thou. I can preview it, and it writes the tool paths for me. And immediately I can see I'm not getting any lead in, lead out on those holes because it's such a large value. You can see it on the slot, and right here, it just doesn't fit in the holes. So let's go to our lead in, lead out, and maybe instead of 100%, let's try 25% and preview that to see if we can get something that actually fits in the holes. That looks good. And our linking parameters are all set. That looks all right. Let's hit OK. And now this part is completely done except for the drills. So let's take a look at that. We didn't define a drill in our tool manager because we wanted to explore the auto drill and have it automatically pick that up for us. So in our 2D toolpaths, we'll go down to the auto drill function. And I'm going to use a mask on arc option. I can't see my wireframe holes beyond this, so let's make it translucent. And I'm going to use this button to mask it on a specific size arc. When I click that, I can click the arc, and now it's telling me to make a window around the area I would like to search for arcs that match that value. So I'm just going to make a window around that whole boundary. And it selects all of those arcs that fit that criteria. So my entire list is comprised of all my 0.15 arcs. I'm going to hit OK. It's going to launch the auto drill portion of this toolpath. So we're going to do just a basic drill. You can also do spot drilling, chamfer with the spot drills, different stuff like that. In this case, I only want to do the drill, so that's the only one I'm going to select. On my depth, I'm going to tell it how deep I want it to go. So let's go absolute, and I'm going to grab the bottom of my part. And the top of stock, I'll change to absolute and grab the top of my part. And the tip comp, I'm going to turn that on and have it break through by 20 thou. And maybe the retract, let's change this to absolute and go 0.125. And then when I hit the green check, it's automatically going to look at those holes and determine what drill best fits it. So it grabbed the number 25 drill automatically for me. If I go to my back plot, I want to take a look at it, I can see it did a great job doing all that. Now, one thing it did, it's kind of got a screwy pattern. So I may want to go into my geometry and say, let's sort this so it drills it in a better motion. So I'm going to go into my geometry. I'm going to tell it to go point to point, but the start point is where I want it to tell it to move from. And I'll start with that arc that I selected for that mask. So I'll say select a point, use that one as my start point, hit OK, regenerate it, and now it moves in a much better motion. And I didn't have to go in and select my drill, it did that all automatically. The only thing it didn't do automatically is it didn't put in the correct tool number maybe, because it's going to pull it from the library. So it says it's tool number 89. If I go to my tool manager, I can change this instead of tool 89. I can change it to tool 13, let's say. Regen that. And now this is all completely run. So I want to see what it looks like compared to the part. It's going to go through my facing and dynamic lane operations. Each one is a different color, so I can easily identify what it's doing. As it moves from one to the other, I can say, oh, I've got some problems with this. That's the nice thing about the verify as well. You can go through and see anything in bright red, it actually is gouging the part. If you do your compare to your model, you'll see that immediately there too. So it looks like I have some issues with those rapid heights on a couple of my tool paths. So if I take a look at this, let's go to my contour tool path. And when I turn that on, I can say, oh yeah, look, that goes right through my part. So let's change this in my parameters to, instead of incremental on my feed rate, let's retract, let's change it to 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch absolute. And if I preview that, now you can see it kicks that up. That looks good. And let's see where we're at now. We'll let it run through the process again. Everything is its own color, no red in there. That all looks good. If I compare it to my actual model, everything's looking green, looking good. All right, looks pretty good. Next thing I want to do is just say, let's take this part and post the code so it's ready for the machine. That's as simple as just grabbing this, hitting our post code, and it's going to write it to the machine that I have selected. And when it's done, it's going to bring up our editor so we can actually take a look at it. And it's ready for the machine. It's got a tool list at the beginning showing us what tools we're going to be using, and then it jumps into the code. Last thing I need is if I want to pass this off to somebody else so that they can run it, I want to generate a setup sheet that is simple and easy for them to understand and follow. So I'm going to kill this, and I'm going to go to my setup sheet. By right-clicking in here, I'll go to my setup sheet. And you can double-click on the list at the bottom, and you can see there's different options in here. I'm going to try Setup Sheet Mill 2 because it's a little more condensed than the original one. But you can go in here and specify your project name, the customer, programmer, and it is information that's going to be output to your setup sheet as well. The first picture you're going to see is always what's on your screen. So whatever is positioned on your screen is going to be on your sheet. When I hit the green check, it's going to generate that sheet for me. And it will eventually pull this up. There we go. Okay, so there's our setup sheet. Picture of the initial drawing as it sat on my Mastercam screen. It's going to show me a list of all my toolpath operations, minimum and maximum Z's, cycle times, and a tool list of everything that's been done. So it's easy to look at, print out, hand off, pass off to somebody else, and let them take it from there and get it run on the machine. So that's kind of the whole process from beginning to end, taking a simple napkin sketch to a model to a fully finished part with code specific for your machine.